I have very nearly 38,000 kilometers on my 2013 Kawasaki Ninja ZX-6R, or as the sticker at the front says, also known as Ninja 636, very simply because a 636 cubic centimeter displacement inline-4 engine is mounted on the motorcycle thereabouts. This video is my long-term review on the motorcycle and everything that relates to ownership of the motorcycle. And by now you know me, thank you very much, by the way, 10,900 subscribers, that if there's anything to complain about, I will not fail to point out. And I'm very happy to tell you right away that I only have 6 problems about this motorcycle that I could complain about, and 5 of those are redesign issues and 1 is a manufacturing or assembly problem. I will tell you what I can do about those, how they affect the ride or the ownership of the motorcycle, and what I actually decided to do about those. Some of them are resolved fairly simply and inexpensively. This is how this video is structured. First off, I'll explain a little bit about how the motorcycle is being used and what kind of condition it's being ridden, and what kind of use it sees. Then I'll explain a little bit about what kind of modifications are on the bike. Moving on to maintenance, what had to be done in the past, regular maintenance as well as extra maintenance, but extra maintenance that aren't amount to an actual problem, but just extra maintenance outside of the regular. And then I'm gonna detail the problems after that. So let's get started first. The motorcycle is, let me just put you on the tripod for a little bit here. The motorcycle is being insured all year round, is being used all year round. That means 12 months in a year, and that means winter as well. I live in the Pacific Northwest, where we don't have a whole lot of snow, but we have about 9 months of rain. And this is not just a sprinkly little bit of rain. No, this is maybe not torrential downpours, because the rains are quiet but they are constant. So as a result, we have about 42 inches of rain. That's from the ground up. This is 42 inches, or 1200 millimeters of 1.2 meters of rain in a year. That's a lot of rain. So all of the components go through 9 months of this type of use, or these kind of conditions. It's not very cold, like I said. We don't have much snow. We have maybe 3 days of snow in a year on average. That could be like the winter in 2016 to 2017. We had 35 days of snow or something like that. Big deal. I took the bus on some days when the snow wasn't cleaned up at all, and on some other days when it was kind of cleaned up, I could take the motorcycle with the same tires as is, no changes whatsoever. Just, pick a wheel behind a bus or behind a big heavy truck and just putt to work, because that's exactly how this motorcycle is used. It's used for commuting. My commuting distance is about 12 kilometers. It's not a huge distance, but there is no highway portion in it. So most of the time the motorcycle's speed doesn't exceed 60 kilometers an hour, and the revs are kept under 4,000 definitely. So the revs don't even climb in the mid-ranges or anything. There is no aggressive shifting. There is some lane changes and merging with traffic, but not a whole lot of engine spinning is required to do that. As a result, my valve clearances needed 0 adjustment so far, because the fewer revs the engine goes through and the more putt the traffic is, the longer the engine lasts. And conversely, the more you rev the engine, the more friction the engine has to go through. Friction will wear the engine out. So far I didn't have to touch anything on the engine, but that's coming up with the maintenance as well. So that's basically the frame of how this motorcycle is being used, and let's move on to modifications. What do we have here? This motorcycle has ABS front and back, that's factory standard, as well as Kawasaki's traction control system on it that has 3 modes and off. The engine has 2 power modes, low and high, and you can toggle between the two. And that's basically, oh, it has an assist slash slipper clutch here, but because I'm not using the bike for racing, I really can't say that I used aggressive downshifting or anything such, not happening in commuting traffic. As well as a very handy feature though, Kawasaki intelligent braking system. It's a linked brake system. I really appreciate the motorcycle's ABS system, its linked brakes and its traction control. That's why I have this bike in commuting. In these rains, the manhole covers are wet, the road paint is wet as well, and with changing lanes, crossing these lines, you know, these traction condition changes, and I use and really appreciate the fantastic traction control system and how everything's worked out on the motorcycle in terms of ABS, linked ABS, and the traction control electronics. So what do we have on this motorcycle that's stock, and what do we have for modification? Let me get you off the tripod again and come on over here. Very obviously, the motorcycle is fitted with an aftermarket exhaust here. I really don't care much about it. This is how the motorcycle came. It was already fitted on it. The motorcycle had a few 100 kilometers on it, and somebody bought the bike, took it back to the dealer, something like that, and they didn't need the whole thing. They just abandoned it, and I bought it for a nice price tag. So I really don't care about the aftermarket exhaust because it doesn't enhance any way, shape or form my daily commuting. The weight saving or the changes to the sound really doesn't enhance my commuting. I need to get from A to B. It's a really, maybe not boring ride, but because the changing traffic conditions and the changing traction conditions are always challenging, but it's not enhanced by having a different exhaust. You know, it doesn't help me negotiate space margins around the vehicle or doing shoulder check, and you know, staying alive on the motorcycle is not really helped by a different aftermarket exhaust. What is helping me, like I said, is the electronics package that relates to braking and traction control. So that's one of the modifications. Another one is I fitted this GPS mount here on one of the tank mounting bolts right here. Very straightforward. So that's the original mounting bolt, and that's the other mounting bolt. This is how this is done. Very straightforward. And this is GPS mount, and this is a 12-volt weatherproof accessory outlet here, and with the wire sticking out. I don't know if I want to keep it this way or I want to bend this bracket metal sheet. This is some stainless steel, so I could bend the 90-degree corner on it somewhere and use it that way, but that's gonna make the lid pointing vertically up. So I have a separate video about the installation of this, and I'm not sure I'm gonna leave it in this final location as is. I tried it just tucked underneath the fairing panels here. It's not really practical there, so I'm not sure where I'm gonna end up with this one, but I have it on the motorcycle. Obviously GPS, phone, everything works together. One very minor modification, I'm not sure if it's really a modification, but I have this stylish juice bottle cap here hanging on a piece of tie wire that's obviously covering the ignition cylinder lock set here. The rain isn't much of a problem in it when it's just one rain or a little rain, but you know, 42 inches of rain is a problem, is washing out the lubricant, as well as when the little film of water does freeze in it in the winter, then you can't start your motorcycle, so it's a problem. Henceforth my solution is this modification. Fantastic, I'm sure. Next one here is a very minor thing. With the headlights, I have a different headlight bulb with a higher lumen rating on the light bulb than the original stock. not a huge issue, but it has to do with visibility. And on the 49th parallel here we have in the winter 16 hours of dark and only 8 hours of light, so I need to be seen as well as I need to see on the road. That basically all the modifications, except one more thing that's on this side here underneath the handlebar, and that has to do with one of the failures that happened, and this can leave you stranded, and I will explain what happened and what caused it and what I do about it. And a few hours later I have added one more modification to the bike, this stainless steel plate that replaced the previous aluminum version and is held in place by this snap connector, which needs to be pressed in order to hold it, and then this one comes out. So the point of this stainless steel plate, which has this shape finally, is to protect these pipes so they don't get right behind the front wheel here, so they don't get coated with muck from the rain, as rain, like I said, is not clean. So 9 months out of the 12 these pipes would be coated with mud, and I want these pipes to be as clean as possible for heat exchange and cooling. And this plate also protects slightly the engine, and there I can pull out the panel, you can see the sump there, just slightly, because the tire doesn't have huge knobs on it. This tire is not going to throw large rocks on the engine, but so some protection on the pipes. Okay, so that's one more modification. So that basically concludes the modifications on the motorcycle, and the reason for the apparent lack of modifications is because any aftermarket brake lines, any aftermarket brake rotors, or aftermarket or frame sliders or different foot pegs, and nothing really enhances my commuting. I have to be really upfront with you here on this. I like this motorcycle despite a couple of these design flaws and issues, the 6 of them that are coming up, and I don't think by doing any modifications with a power chip or whatever it cannot be enhanced. This is engineered extremely well, manufactured brilliantly. It cannot really be meaningfully enhanced with some aftermarket Mickey Mouse components. Okay, now some of the aftermarket components like upgraded suspension or different spring rates and different weight of oil, you know, I'm not racing, so I don't need those modifications. But for most modifications that you can get, different sprockets and different chains and heavier chains usually that weigh more than the stock chain, no. Okay, so for most modifications I don't need a fuzzy little wrap that wraps the brake fluid reservoir at the front brake there or anything, okay, because it doesn't enhance my ride and doesn't add to functionality. So let's go over the regular maintenance items, very straightforward. Let's start with brake wheel and tire. What happened here? The tires were replaced at one point on it as needed and plugged. I'm running metal tires on it. I got rid of the Bridgestone tires. I didn't like the Bridgestone S10, and I have a review about it, and that's the end of that. You can watch that. I really don't want to detail much about the tires. The bearings needed to be replaced at one point at the front because the bearings around the axle or inside the hub maybe not collapsed, but they were really bad. Okay, and I have a separate video about it. Brake pads needed to be replaced and all the time, and brake needs cleaning and internally cleaning and taking some of the, due to the rains, you know, the brake pad material that wears away doesn't just float away from it and settles. No, it clogs together in clumps and it needs to be cleaned from the inside of the brake. Make sure the brake piston, you have 2 pistons on this side and 2 pistons on the other side. Make sure the pistons have a full range of motion, and the vacuum that's provided by the little bellows here underneath the cap is actually retracting the the brake pistons, so it needs a lot of looking after in the rain. Typically on a monthly basis, if I can get a non-rainy half-hour break or so, when I can get to it and re-grease some of these pins here, the brake pad retainer pins, that kind of stuff. So brakes need a lot of looking after, all regular maintenance. There is nothing special about it. And like I said, I'm not replacing the original brake lines with aftermarket stainless steel brake lines. I'm not running racing brake pads on it or racing compounds or special anything, just the same stock stuff. Double H sintered pads, because they work best in rain at low temperatures. I need brake pads that work at low temperatures. In the winter we have about 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 5 degrees, whatever, and so that's what I mean by low temperature, and that's air temperature. So that's brake story. Engine, let's do the engine. Engine needed, of course, engine oil and filter on multiple occasions according to the periodic maintenance table in the owner's manual. The air filter in it is a washable type. Okay, I guess I should have listed that as a modification, however minor it is. It's a washable, reusable air filter. Have separate videos on it. Take it out, clean it with its special cleaner, put it back on. It's a little DLC, but it allows me to clean the air filter box as well, because rain isn't clean. Rain leaves, the bike sucks in air here at the front, goes through the steering stem there, goes through the frame and goes into the airbox in a straight line there. The air okay, when it's raining, the motorcycle sucks in a lot of this sediment, dissolved sediment that's in the rain, into the airbox. It gets deposited inside the airbox as a layer, and it needs to be rinsed out and washed out from the airbox. So with the washable air filter, I take out the whole airbox, take it off the throttle bodies, and have a garden hose and rinse the entire and clean the entire airbox, lower half, upper half, the seal in between, the foam that's inside the airbox. Okay, and so the washable air filter works for me. Throttle body synchronization was done, and standard maintenance item, and the valve clearances were checked regularly, but nothing ever had to be adjusted. I didn't need different shims, because most of the RPMs, like I said, in commuting putt-putt traffic, everything is kept under 4,000 RPM, so it didn't wear enough to need different shims. And next one, let's do chains and sprockets. They were replaced once in 38,000 kilometers, because I'm not on the throttle, I'm not stretching it, I'm not abusing it, and they wore very little, and they needed replacement just once, even though most chain manufacturers say change it after 20,000 kilometers. Yeah, depending on how you ride and how much maintenance you do on it. And the chains, besides the brakes, the chain is also one thing that always needs re-lubricating religiously. The chain manufacturers say every 500 kilometers, the owner manual says probably every 700 kilometers or something like that. It needs to be done quite often, because the gritty rain sand blasts right next to the wheels, sand blasts out the lubricants from the little joints, the little links on the chain. I have different videos on chain maintenance, how they wear, where they wear, and how I extend their chain's life so it actually lasts 38,000 kilometers, because it was just changed recently, seriously. What else did we do here? Oh yeah, steering stem. At one point the steering stem needed re-lubrication, because at the factory it's lightly greased. Now the bearings on the steering stem are not high-speed wheel bearings. They are very low-speed bearings, but they pack them very lightly with grease. I don't know why. I changed that fairly early on in my ownership, so that was done within the first 4 months or so, that I packed it full with grease properly to keep out the rain, obviously. Let's see, the locks that I mentioned, these need continuous lubrication as well, because the rains wash out some of the lubricants from it. And the gas tank is made of steel, and paint chips happen on the gas tank all the time. Let me just show you a close-up. I have different videos on that one as well, how some of these fixes look like. They look like so the tank is not rusting, okay? They are not beautiful, they are just done, okay? That's all there is to it. It's a very utilitarian approach. You can see it from, what distance is it? I don't know, 50 centimeters. You can see them already, so that's like a little less than 2 feet. Okay, so that's gas tank. It's not really an item from your maintenance manual that you fix the paint on it, but it is a regular maintenance thing. Oh, one more thing about fairing, I want to point out something, is that stones are gathered in the fairing panels. Let me just show you some little stones there, like, how do I get my hand to it? Okay, you can see some stones in these recesses and in gaps, in whatever gaps you have on the fairing. Stones, little stones gather everywhere, okay? In these gaps, there is a gap between here where it says Kawasaki. It's difficult to read, that's why I'm kind of playing with the shadow. Okay, stone chips get small stone grits get caught underneath the windshield here, or between the windshield and that plastic surface that reads Kawasaki on it. And yeah, so air does go through here, and these stone chips get caught everywhere. What they do is, one, they scratch the windshield. Two, they make the panel gaps wider. They force themselves into the gaps, and then more and more of them. Like, there's nothing here at the moment, but this is what I mean, okay? And especially more so with the fairing panels next to the wheel. So cleaning the stone chips, I just remove periodically these panels, or shake out the stones from it, just like so, tapping by hand, very unsophisticated. But that's also one more thing that I have to watch for. So that concludes all the periodic maintenance items. Oh, I forgot to mention, with the engine, of course, the spark plugs were changed as per maintenance schedule. Now, some other items that are extra maintenance, they are nowhere near mentioned in the owner's manual, but these things happen, and just keep an eye on the following items. This one is rusting here. This is a small mild steel bracket that's holding the ABS line here, as well as this grommet through which this brake line runs. This bracket is very inexpensive, so that rusting, you either send it and repaint it yourself, or just get another one. So that's also an extra maintenance item that the owner manual says nothing about. It's not a deal breaker or not a serious issue. Well, actually, why I have this motorcycle for commuting in the winter and throughout all year with road salting and everything in place is that I like the materials the motorcycle is made out of. There is another bracket like that at the front, of course. It's located on the left side of the motorcycle, and it's about in the same condition. You see this same idea basically. ABS line running through it, and here is a rubber grommet, and the brake line is running through it, and you can see it's corroding just like the other one. Now, this one is trickier to replace. You see it's riveted there with those two rivets into the fender, so good luck replacing this. That's how it sits there. Of course you can drill out a rivet and re-rivet it. I'm just saying it's a little more work. Now, ideally Kawasaki went with rivets here instead of bolts. You really don't want loose nuts or loose whatever rattling around the spinning wheel that can spin at really high speeds. So that's another one. A third one is rusting away quietly here. The kickstand itself, same stuff, mild steel, painted, and it needs to be repainted every so often. It's rusting there at the contact point when it's folded up and it hits the underside of this part of the bracket here. You can see any amount of paint that used to be there, not anymore. So that's how the corrosion situation looks like. Minimal, I would say, but this stuff does need a little bit of looking after. And there's one more screw that is rusting, and that's mounting the switch at the front here, but it's really difficult to see, so I can just show you the switch itself is, how do I put my hand to it? Yeah, this is the switch. When I pull the brake lever, so that's the switch, and the switch has a mounting screw, and the mounting screw is rusty. The threads are fine, and the screw comes out without a problem. So rusty items. None of the other screws have any kind of rusting. They don't need wiping, they don't need cleaning. That's why this motorcycle works out extremely well, because I like the materials the motorcycle is made of. So that's that. One more rusty item is the steering stem is made out of steel, and this has a rubber grommet here, which I have removed just for this video. You can see corrosion right there, because this is hardened steel, not soft stainless steel, and as the somehow water gets by the edges of the grommet, and there you have it, corrosion. As well as there is a grommet here, which I have also removed, and you can see through the steering stem there, you can see the fender in the underneath in the middle of the picture there. So I don't know if water enters here or whatever, but so there is this little rubber cap here that also keeps the water out. But whatever it is, however the water gets in there, there is corrosion as is on the lower end of the steering stem, but the bearings are fine because I repacked them with grease. And this is how this plug looks like, fairly straightforward, just a plastic plug, and gets in place like so, fairly straightforward. Now this one, still the rust and whatever corrosion product is still on it for the underside of the steering stem. This one has a very thoughtful drain hole, which is nice. It's draining everything from here, but it's not draining anything from the outside, because I don't know, I guess this little cut there in the outside is supposed to drain anything, so the amount of moisture that does get in there is just fairly minimal. That's why it's not draining more stuff, or that's why it's not corroding more, just this much. So also friction fit, just like this, like so. Done. I'm gonna have to remove that rust a little bit, but that's how that looks like. There was one extra maintenance item that was so annoying it almost made it to the problems list, especially that it involves a little bit of redesign from Kawasaki possibly, and it has to do with fairing and fairing bolts and the frame. Most of the fairing panels go together with these bolts here, and it goes into fairing, into plastic or into a nylon nut on the other side, or they go, the whole fairing assembly mounts onto the frame with a combination of grommets and bolts. So here is one grommet location here. This is part of the frame, this metal bracket, and here is a rubber grommet, and into the rubber grommet this pin goes into it. There, fairing is mounted. However, at two locations, one here, bolts go into the frame, and of course one on the other side, almost mirror opposite, but it's slightly differently arranged. Yeah, this bolt here and goes into this little spur that's sticking out from the frame. So the frame is made of aluminum or aluminium, depending on where you live. The fasteners are made of steel, and because they are dissimilar metals, they need some extra looking after. It's just the same idea as the steel pins. The brake pad retaining pins are dissimilar metal from the aluminum caliper body, and they could corrode just because they are dissimilar. Some dissimilar metals, we'll just go with that. Okay, this is some galvanic corrosion, has nothing to do with actual water hitting the steel pin. There is some voltage difference between the two metals and they just corrode. Okay, so what happened here is this bolt broke, of course, into the frame. So these bolts, just like the brake pins, need fairly often or periodic removal or an anti-seize compound on them or something to prevent this galvanic corrosion. The same way, this bolt needs to be taken out periodically, the same as for the other bolt on the other side, because this one broke into the frame. Now, a broken bolt took me weeks to remove it from the frame because I did not want to weaken the frame or mess with the frame. Even so, I broke drill bits into the broken bolt end, and it wasn't coming out easily. So if Kawasaki could mount the fairing somehow differently with a little extension that spurs out or branches out from the frame, so if this happens again, it's not the frame that's being compromised or fabricated upon or messed around with. Okay, some rethought is needed maybe on these bolts, but in the meanwhile it's very simple. Just periodically remove it, put it back on. Very straightforward. So that's what happened to this bolt. That's why this bolt is new, because it broke in half. Oh yeah, we have some cracking of the wire jacketing here. Okay, so what do we have here? On the left hand side of the bike you can see one length of the wiring harness, this one here, that goes around the fork there, passes between the fork and the steering stem, and it's cracking out. So just a few spots, and it's very cheap and inexpensive. So 2 spots there and the 3rd spot there. So you can see wires in it of all kinds of colors leading to this switch gear here that controls the low beam, high beam, turn signal, horn, and the traction control modes and the power modes. So these wires are kind of important, okay? And fixing this is very straightforward. I'm sure I can find another. This is some soft PVC something. I really don't want to disconnect all of the wires to do this, but if I wait with this until the wires, one of the individual wires jacketing wears through, so that the actual wire shows through and it grounds the current through the fork to the frame, and if one of the breakers flip and makes the motorcycle inoperable, that's gonna be problematic. So this can potentially leave you stranded by the roadside. You have to look at it and either wrap it with electrician's tape, just a few turns wherever, or I have a piece of I don't know, washing machine drain hose or something that I can cut up lengthwise and just have it, you know, wrapping the cables on top of this failing cracking jacketing. Alright, so that's an electrical issue that can potentially leave you stranded. Bent rotor with disc lock. Now that's an extra maintenance item because the owner operator was stupid. What happened here, I put the disc lock here on the motorcycle, and the disc lock did not have batteries in it. It's an alarmed disc lock, and it usually comes with the curly phone wire that you usually put on the handlebar, your memory jogger, to remind you that disc lock is on the disc. Yeah, I neither had batteries in it that would make the siren or the beeper or whatever in it go off, and I didn't have that wire to it either. So and I forgot that it's in place. As a result, I bent the brake disc 3 times just to make sure. So it's an extra maintenance item. It has nothing to do with the motorcycle being good or bad. Actually, I'm telling you, the motorcycle is very forgiving. You can see the cracked plastic here. Yeah, oops. Because I was pushing the motorcycle backwards, so the disc lock rotated up. So I cracked it on this side. I cracked it on this side as well, of course, because you need to repeat it just to make sure that both sides are symmetrical. So, complete operator error. However, the plastics are really good quality. They are very forgiving. So is the brake rotor, which needed eventually complete replacement, cost hundreds of dollars. Yeah, Kawasaki is not at fault whatsoever. It's all me. And same with the fender. Eventually it needs replacement. I can't fix cracked plastic, but you know, it's forgiving enough and it works, and I like the plastic as well. The motorcycle has also been tipped over a number of times, causing a number of microscopic scratches, or maybe not microscopic, but you get the idea. This is the brake lever. This one is on the fairing. This one is some scuff mark on the fairing. All this is on the fairing because in the sidewalk here where I park the motorcycle often, if the side stand goes into one of these cracks, or I move the steering and whatever, and the side stand ends up in the rut next to the sidewalk and it goes over to its side. Yeah, it happened multiple times that I chipped the plastic or scratched the plastic, or yeah, this one is also hitting a curb of something, one of those concrete fantastic structures there, so I had to file away a little bit of the plastic to make it less sharp and make it look like it's not missing, even though it used to be straight here. So these kind of things. The plastic is really good quality, forgiving, and a nice plastic that has a lot of flex and a lot of give in it. I really like the quality of the plastic and the quality of the finish on it. From a distance you wouldn't be able to tell maybe right away. Also another chunk is missing here when I tipped the bike over in the winter, filming something about winter riding conditions, and yeah, this little chunk was missing. On the other side, what do we have on the other side? Not a whole lot on the other side, I guess. Yeah, some scuff marks also on the plastic. You know, like I said, I don't know what that crack line is in it. So plastic isn't cheap, but this is really good quality plastic, and I'm happy about this plastic. One more thing, stock gear shifter between 3rd and 4th gear. Yeah, that was a one-time problem when gear shifting. Okay, gear shifting on this side. I was coming around the corner, blip, 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 shifting down, and then it was just stuck, and I couldn't do anything with it. So I had to take it apart on that side, take it apart on this side, disconnect the clutch cable, pull out the clutch cover, remove all the clutch plates and friction discs and the whole clutch assembly with the clutch baskets, everything. And underneath the shifter mechanism, the shift shaft had to be pulled through, and then everything just clicked into place and fixed itself, I guess, and put everything back together. So, did it leave me stranded? Yes. Is it a maintenance thing? Not really, but it isn't a design flaw either. It's not a problem, it happened once, and I've been motorcycling since age 14 or so, and I've never had anything like this happen on any of my motorcycles I've ever owned. So I just count it as it happened once, and it's a maintenance thing, and it's not a design flaw. So that's that. Let's move on to the problems, and I have a whole list of problems. And just before I go into the details of the 6 design flaws and problems, I do want to point out again that I like everything about this motorcycle. I like its seating position and ergonomics, the wheels, the suspension, the materials chosen for the motorcycle. I like its maintenance intervals. I like the gas mileage on it. I like the airflow around the bike. I like the footpeg height, the riding position. I like the sound it makes with or without the aftermarket exhaust. So everything about the bike is really well thought out, brilliantly engineered, and I really like it. And that's also, like I said, I can't really extend the functionality of the motorcycle with any aftermarket exhaust or any aftermarket parts of any kind whatsoever that I could come up with, other than MotoGP level modifications, which I have absolutely no need for. So, first item that's a design flaw and issue: mirrors. Mirrors vibrate over 4,000 RPM. Especially in first and second gear, not so much in third gear, a little less in fourth, fifth is almost tolerable, sixth is really nice actually. So that's how you can see that 4,000 RPM is really low in the RPM range, considering that the bike can rev out to 14,750. So the 4,000 RPM is really low. In sixth gear, the motorcycle is putt-putting at around 70 kilometers an hour in sixth gear at 4,000, so it's really low. What do I do about the vibrating mirrors? It's an issue in traffic because you need to do your mirror checks and shoulder checks to make sure you have enough space margins around you. So what's with the mirrors? There are a couple of options. I could experiment with a longer stem or a shorter stem or a different stem that has a different resonant frequency that changes the vibration modes on the motorcycle, or different mirrors with shorter or longer stem also have mirrors here that are heavier or lighter or just different with and different resonant frequencies would make the mirrors resonate less or more or just differently. So that's one theoretical option. I really don't want to experiment with the mirrors whatsoever for 3 reasons. One, it doesn't affect my commuting. I do need to see, I do need mirrors, but I can shift to higher gears, and in higher gears the mirrors are stable enough. 2, you can pull in the clutch, and that changes the RPM range right away, and you can check your mirrors. Now, how convenient is that is up to you. I can live with it as is. The third reason why I do stay with the mirrors is that they are not broken, meaning the glass lens in it is not broken. And like I said, I've tipped the motorcycle over multiple times, and you can see battle scars on the mirror's plastic housing here on it. At the tip here, I just file the displaced plastic flat with a nice needle file or nail file or something small, especially more so on this side here. So what happens is that when the motorcycle tips over, is the mirrors fold away one way or another, this way or whichever way. So the mirrors never broke, despite the fact that the motorcycle has been tipped over multiple times, both sides. So I'm not changing the mirrors and experimenting with the mirrors because they are not broken. Very simple. So I don't know if it's an impact resistant plastic or what happens, but they just haven't broken on me yet. I also like that the whole arm articulates here at this point so they can fold away, and I like the nice tight ball joint here, that even when the motorcycle is covered with a tarp or a motorcycle cover, you know, the settings don't get pulled out of position, and at high speed, at any kind of vibration levels, the mirrors stay put, in the sense that the angles, the amount of elbow I see in the mirror and the traffic behind me, whatever, that angle that I set up in it doesn't change. It's just that the mirror shakes in lower gears above 4,000 RPM. So in city I can work around it enough, and I like the mirrors as they are enough so not changing that. But and this is a design issue. Next one, oh yeah, handlebars. The handlebars shake, you know, but you can see that from the wear on this weight at the end of the handlebar that they have been in place forever. I'm not changing anything about the handlebars. I could go with a gel grip on it, or different bar end weights, or just again different length, longer or shorter clip-ons, or different clip-ons. You know, I'm doing absolutely nothing about it. For the 12-kilometer length of commuting, it's fine. On a highway, and I'm gonna take this motorcycle, or planning to take this motorcycle to the Yukon, it's a completely different story. And for longer rides, I have gloves that have an extra layer of foam in it, and that foam is a mods on the glove itself, so I'm not changing the bike. It's easier to add different layers of foam or gel pad or something, tuck it into the glove that's between your palm and the glove, and then my problems are solved, you know, for transmitting vibration through the bones, you know, when you put your weight on the handlebar. So that's what I do with the handlebar shake. Next one, ergonomics. Shoulder checks are hard because the motorcycle is you lean forward on it quite a bit, and when leaning forward you turn your head sideways. It's kind of a tricky thing to do the shoulder check on it, but it cannot be resolved or redesigned or re-engineered because the motorcycle is a race bike. So that just the fact that you lean forward on it, and it's not gonna be changed anytime soon. End of story. Kawasaki could come up with a different handle, a different clip-on that mounts on the top of the fork, so it's taller, but that would make it a different model, and they would probably revise the engine and make it into a naked bike. No, I need the fairing because of the rain. I need the windshield to keep me as dry as possible, and the fairing works, by the way, fantastically well to keep my legs, and the windshield to keep my hip and lap and whatever, half my upper body dry enough. And for my arms and head and chest, yeah, you need rain gear. It's a motorcycle. So that's about shoulder checks and space margins. I just work around it and live with it. Another problem number 4, this is more serious now. This left me stranded. Clutch switch. Let's come over here to this side. Alright, the clutch lever here has a switch underneath, just like the brake lever has a brake light switch underneath. And on this motorcycle, the clutch switch is not plugged in. It's plugged into this yellow wire. I completely got rid of the clutch switch, so the clutch switch is on the desk in a bowl or something like that. It's being eliminated from the circuit. The function of the clutch switch is that if the motorcycle is left in gear, it cannot be started without pulling the clutch lever in. That's nice in theory, and it's a safety feature, but I keep doing the same. So I keep doing the same as if the clutch switch wasn't eliminated. It's bypassing a safety feature, but because I keep to the habit, I just stay safe with it and don't start the motorcycle, or don't hit the start button on the handlebar there with the motorcycle in gear. It does happen every so often that the motorcycle is stopped at an intersection, that I kill the engine or whatever, and I need to restart. But the clutch switch was eliminated because it failed on me. Okay, this switch is a switch that's called normally open, so the clutch switch's function is only when the clutch lever is pulled in. That's when the switch is closed. Now with this piece of yellow wire, this clutch switch is permanently closed. Okay, always closed, instead of just normally open and occasionally closed. Now it's always closed. So this gives me an anti-theft ability here. If I pull the wire out from this clutch switch, it doesn't matter what you do with the clutch lever, pull it in any way you want, motorcycle will not start whatsoever. This is why this can leave you stranded. So that clutch switch failed, and I did not replace it. I'm not going to replace it because the new ones are the same as the old ones and it needs a redesign. So that's my clutch switch story there. Item number 5 is right here on this side, and it's about engine oil. Engine oil, you can kind of see that, okay, there is a connector here on the wiring harness. You can see the wiring harness has this electrical tape on it that's kind of giving up on the glue and is unwrapping itself, and the wiring harness, let me just get these breather hoses out of the way a little bit. This wiring harness also continues into this jacketing here that leads to the neutral switch there. Okay, what's the story here with these electrical components? Okay, we have here a manufacturing problem where along about a 1-inch length or so seam somewhere between the lower crank, the sump here and the engine's case here, or somewhere underneath the water pump. This is the water pump, this engine coolant runs in this hose here. So somewhere the seal is imperfect and some oils escape the crankcase. The oils usually, it's like dew in the morning type depositing is happening on the inner side of this fairing that needs to be wiped off, say twice a year. Okay, so it's not a whole lot of amount of engine oil that's lost through that little imperfection in the seal. You can see here where it's different color, the fairing here where it's wiped off. So it is so little, it's a microscopic little leak, but it does leave an oily film here. It's microscopic droplets of vapor condensed or deposited here, and what I do with it, is just wipe it off twice a year because it's so little. So how it affects the electronics is, you can see it's dissolving the glue on the electrical tape. The clutch, or what, not clutch, sorry, the neutral switch here just has a jacketing, so I'm gonna leave the neutral switch there, and I moved the connector. This was all oily. Once this stuff gets oily here, dirt particles get trapped in it, and then it appears to be fuzzy and disgusting, and I really don't want to contaminate this connector with oil on it. Okay, this leads to the side stand here. This is the side stand switch, which is also normally open, another safety feature, so that when the bus side stand is in this down position, the motorcycle cannot be started. So if something goes wrong with this side stand switch or connection here, then I won't be able to start the motorcycle. Any fault here could potentially leave you stranded, or could potentially bypass this safety feature if the oils close the circuit permanently, like I closed the circuit permanently at the clutch switch there. The oil could do that to close the circuit permanently. In that case, you would be able to start the motorcycle even with the side stand down, and it's a safety problem. So what I'm doing about it is, instead of resealing and opening the crankcase and doing a whole lot of work, I just moved this connector here so that it's at the height of this bolt here on the water pump body, and this is the wire holder there, and at this height here this stays dry because the oil vapors will be further down below it, and that's all I'm doing about this. A little bit of a manufacturing problem here where some oil vapors leave the crankcase, and it's not even a cubic centimeter of oil. It's just so little, but it makes everything oily and messy and whatever. I don't like it, and so due to these electrical reasons, that's why I That's why I'm doing this with the wire, keeping the wire out of the oil. End of story there. Last item is concerning the brake pad here. Not brake pad, brake pedal. The brake pedal here was, let me just sit on this foam here. The brake pedals here were, you see, I fitted this extra washer into this brake pedal system here because the brake pedal was having too much of a play sideways. Okay, there is a spring here. The spring is pulling this brake lever or rotating the brake lever slightly sideways, and at the pivot point here where the foot peg mounting bolt goes through into this corner of this bracket, at this bolt here that goes through the brake pedal there, the brake pedal is fitting very poorly or very loosely around that pivot point there. I have a separate video of what happened here, all kinds of close-ups on everything, how it looked before, how it looks after. Is it? Everything is lubricated and cleaned, and this fit, maybe a bushing or something made by Kawasaki could make this brake pedal more functional. Bottom line, you have here a steel bracket with a weld on it, and this is an aluminum brake pedal, and the aluminum brake pedal gets chewed up by the steel weld, the edge of the steel weld here. And yeah, so here aluminum is touching aluminum, so that's more, they are more compatible, but this steel is eating away hard the surface of the brake pedal, so it's not as bad as would need replacement, but it's okay. And so this is my solution there. This washer needed to be 1.25 millimeters in thickness. Finally, I started with a 2 millimeter washer. It was a miserable story. So that's basically the sixth design item that needs to be kind of revisited or rethought and by Kawasaki, but the other ones are not too bad. That oil leak is a manufacturing problem. The clutch switch needs to be redesigned. The handlebar vibration and the handlebar shake. If you are, if you have a carpal tunnel syndrome, or it affects you, as in rider fatigue, then you have to do something about it. The mirrors could be better, but I could work around it. So those would be the flaws or design issues that are potentially problematic with the motorcycle. But again, and this is now a really long video, despite these faults or small issues or just issues, despite these faults and issues, I really like this motorcycle, and there is very little that can be done on it that could improve. Of course, some of the items do need to be looked at and redesigned. So that basically concludes my long-term review. Thank you very much for watching.